Hello, everyone, and welcome to this top summit. A summit on developing a layered city. And this is a co-production of the Rotterdam Rooftop Days Festival and AIR, the Architecture Institute of Rotterdam. My name is Sophie Stravens, and I'm honored to be your host today during this talk, live from the studio of the Rotterdam Architecture Month. We are at an extraordinary location, we can say, but more about that in a few minutes. And of course, we would prefer to have welcomed you all in real life on the rooftops, maybe, or other great architectural places here in Rotterdam. But we have found this solution, and we welcome you now online via Zoom. And therefore, I want to give you an advice. At the upper right corner, you can find the view modus. And if you put it on speaker mode, then you'll have the best view for this whole afternoon, the coming 2.5 hours. As I said, this talk is part of a collaboration. It is part of the Rotterdam Rooftop Knowledge Day. So this is an afternoon program in Holland because we have an international audience. And this morning, we already had a rooftop farmers meetup, and we had some really inspiring lunch workshops. And in a broader perspective, this Knowledge Day is part of the Rotterdam Architecture Month Festival. So, what are we going to talk about today? The layered city. Cities will continue to grow in terms of population while space is scarce. In 2050, almost up to 70% of the citizens in the world will live in cities. How do we use and design our cities in a intelligent, inclusive, qualitative, and sustainable way? Well, we're going to talk about that later on. In March and April, we already had a series of 4 expert meetings with Dutch experts, and we already gained a lot of knowledge. The reports, blog posts, and podcasts about these expert meetings you can find online. But today we'll take it a step further. We will go into conversation with international, Dutch and international experts on this topic, and we will work together on a manifesto, a top manifesto, a set of strategic tools, a call to action to work together on this layered city. Well, a whole lot of information, large introduction, but now I would like to welcome my first guests here on the table. Welcome, Barbara Luns, Director of AIR, the Architecture Institute of Rotterdam, and Léon van Geest, Director of the Rotterdam Rooftop Days Festival, the Rotterdamse Dakendagen. Very nice to have you here, of course. Barbara, to start with you, you are the director of AIR. You are organizing debates, lectures, design competitions, award shows, expert meetings, a lot of activities to emphasize the importance of architecture, of spatial urban design, and to stimulate a healthy and a vital architectural climate to work in together. You are already you are also an important partner of the Rotterdam Architecture Month, and this is the headquarters, right?
Exactly.
Yeah. Where are we?
Well, with all the points you mentioned before, looking for space in the layered city, I think we found another layer here in a parking garage, 80 meters under the ground. Really in the center of Rotterdam, right in front of the central station. And I think because of Corona, it also, everybody took notice of his own environment and looking for space to take a walk, to sport, to have activities with your family. And everybody took on another glass, put on other glasses on his to look at the city, and so did we. And we were looking for a place to have a large program with a lot of space. Then we found this parking garage, and it's really nice. We took over the deepest floor of the parking garage for an exposition for the rest of the month. Yeah.
And it's next to the studio, right?
It's next to the studio. So the studio is part of the intervention we did. We asked a young architect, Enzo Valerio, to make an intervention that would be a place for the different activities, but also for an exposition about the city and about what is happening in the city, so people can take notice about it. Yeah.
Nice. So you really discovered and put all this in a new layer of the city. Level -5 we are. 18 meters below.
I already somebody of the municipality mentioned, like, why can't we always just take this space in? So already put on some thinking.
So maybe you set an example here.
Who knows?
All right. Well, from parking garage at level -5 to the rooftops, plus 7, 8, how many layers in Rotterdam?
Well, we got a new one with, it's over 100.
The Zalmhaven.
That's a lot of, but that's, no, that rooftop isn't a part of the landscape anymore. It's so high. But what Barbara said, of course, about the municipality thinking, okay, we should use this layer.
Yeah.
That's all we want of the rooftops. And that's what we want with the whole city. We want to use all the layers, so -5, but also the rooftops, but also especially ground level.
Yeah. So to connect all the layers as well.
Yeah. And people ask me, because we advocate rooftops a lot, and people say, okay, are rooftops then the solution for a sustainable city? No, it's not. It's just a part. Because if ground level doesn't work and you go do fantastic things on the rooftops, then you won't have a sustainable city. Then you have a very awful city.
Yeah.
So you have to work together on all those different layers, and rooftops are a few layers in that.
Yeah, and we will talk about the layered city with the two of you in a minute. What do you do? Because you are, till Corona came, you hosted a physical festival, right?
Yeah.
In 2019 was the last festival hosted publicly. How many visitors did you?
We received 22,000 visitors on 65 different rooftops.
And were those 20,000 people in the other months also? Well, could they go up?
No, it was only in that weekend. It was just one weekend with a lot of rooftops and a lot of people.
Really discovering the new layer of the city.
That's the whole idea.
Yeah, perfect. Well, you already told a bit about it, the importance of the layered city, and you as well. What are the most, what things we should talk about? Why is this especially so important to you?
For me, it is because in densifying cities, we need space.
Yeah.
Space is scarce, and of course, rooftops can provide it, but also you have also spaces in between. And when you think vertically in a city, then you have suddenly a lot more room than when you only look at it from a 2D side. And we just need more space, and we need, and I think there's also an opportunity to bring more quality into those spaces. Because you work on different levels, then you have a nicer city than only one straight flat ground level.
Yeah, nice. Barbara, you?
No, I totally agree. And I think it's really about how do you connect these different fields and levels to each other. And also by programming, I think it's very interesting also what Léon does with the Dakendagen is also with these festivities, then you really have a moment to see it from this different perspective, and it's very important to have these moments also to start the conversation about how this city should work, especially when it's densifying more and more, and we have to deal with each other in all this. In the space that there is.
Yeah.
And it's also, of course, you talk about moments, so you also talk about moments in time, and that's also a layer you have. Things that happen at night, things that happen in the morning, things that happen in the summer, things that happen. That's also
different centuries with all the Great. And this is the first collaboration between you on this?
No, we worked together already for a lot of years, but I think we now come to this is the biggest collaboration.
On this layered
Yeah.
city. Yeah, you already mentioned like rooftops, architecture, and
And I think that's good to say about the Rotterdam Architecture Month, because the whole idea is that as architecture partners, people who advocate architecture in any way, we want to work together. So it would be really strange if AIR and the Rotterdamse Dakendagen would not work together. No, we want to work together and tell about Rotterdam and tell about how we see this city, but also how it relates to other cities.
Yeah.
And that's why I think the international part of this Knowledge Day is so important.
Exactly. I totally agree. And I think it's also the month can catalyze this working together. It can be more than just two partners side to side, but how can you be more together? I think
1 + 1 is 3.
Especially. Exactly.
Nice.
Yeah.
And well, today we'll talk about this layered city with Dutch international experts. I will talk about the program in a few minutes. What are your hopes for this afternoon program?
Well, I know all the people who are going to tell things, and I know they have great inspiration. I hope they will keep people from going outside to the sun and actually watch them.
Yeah.
Or else they know that this is there and they watch it afterwards.
Yeah, because everything will be recorded.
Yeah. And I hope people don't see it as a thing, oh, I have to watch all day. No, just pick some things and make it a happy afternoon while cooking and watching a very nice...
really the festival vibe within your own home, actually.
I hope that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think also to have all this knowledge together only in one day already, and then it also shows the potential of this topic. It's very important. I think there are a lot of people that want to talk about this topic, but there's also a lot of expertise during the So it adds up with every edition.
Conversation,
presentation. Exactly. Yeah. It literally adds up to
the layered city. We are building on the layered city. Well, perfect. Thank you very much. Léon, I will see you at the end of the program. And Barbara, you have to go, very busy month, to go somewhere else, but very nice to have you here. Enjoy the afternoon. Success also with the rest of the month. And we'll definitely see you around. Léon, I'll see you at the end.
Thank you. Good luck.
Thank you. Well, we talked about this layered city, and well, Winy Maas of MVRDV has prepared an opening statement of why he thinks this is so important. And it is pre-recorded at a very special place, a rooftop in Rotterdam, his own design, Didden Village.
The Netherlands will keep growing in the coming decades, and partially due to the growing economy. This will take place specifically in our cities because of their attractiveness, their liveliness, and because we should not build in our open landscapes and nature. How do we do that? Space in our cities seems to be scarce, but the sky above us is not. This coincides with the challenges of realizing energy transition, climate adaptation, and inclusivity in our cities. It's a perfect combination of tasks. One helps the other. Rooftops and the sky above them are one of the best urban design possibilities in this respect. We have to go up to build vertically and use our rooftops. By assigning specific functions, whether for specific target groups or not, rooftops can contribute greatly to a layered, inclusive city. To make that work, good design is needed for the rooftop itself, for the access to the rooftop from outside, for the urban inclusivity, for regulations, and for the ownership. Let's include the rooftops and the sky above them in a clear policy in order to clarify under which conditions construction can be allowed. A policy that invites and facilitates people, owners, investors, to explore and to use the rooftops and the sky above them. Let's do a research on densification and turn them into an expansion that is technically and climatically possible, taking into account sun, wind, view, and diversification. Let's carry out studies and rules that combine buildings with water storage and filtering, with greenery and biodiversity, with solar panels and wind turbines, small ones, to turn it into a green, a yellow for energy, a blue for water, and a pink for human beings rooftop policy. Let's research also the ownership of the rooftops, such as shared leaseholds. For this purpose, there should be available help for the owner-occupiers associations. And on top of that, which is the best word I can use, let's study air rights with funds that can contribute to neighborhood level developments, to additional legal tools. Let's make prototypes to test out all these various options. There's 18 square kilometers of flat roof space waiting for us in Rotterdam alone. Welcome to our future city.
Well, thank you, Winy Maas. With me at the table, there's already a guest. I will introduce you in a minute because first I have to explain a bit about the program, a comprehensive program, I can say. We had so many guests we wanted to invite that we have made 2 parallel sessions. So this central opening is in the 2 sessions, but in a few minutes we will split. And in the studio, I will host 4 dialogues at parallel session 1. And in the other parallel session, session 2, it's all in the PDF booklet. Bas Masboom will host a series of 8 presentations. And Bas, can you tell us, where are you?
Hi, Sophie. Thank you for that introduction. As you have just said, my name is Bas Masboom, and I will be your host of the parallel program right here on the roof of the Groot Handelsgebouw, right next to Rotterdam Central Station. It is beautiful weather. We have a great program ahead of us. And I'm quite happy actually not to be a participant today, as I would have a very hard time to pick which of these 2 parallels to choose. Thank you for the organization of both these parallels, Sophie. I hope everybody has had a wonderful morning with the farmers meetup and wonderful lunch workshops that had a fruitful outcome. I'm very sorry, I have mixed up some Zoom links for the lunch workshops, and I hope everybody had found their way fine. There's nothing more left for me to say than let the afternoon program of the Rotterdam Rooftop Days begin. Back to you, Sophie.
Thank you, Bas. So also a very nice location from -5 to +7. Pick and choose what you want to see or follow and, well, enjoy. Right now at the table, we have here Mattijs van Ruijven for the first dialogue, together with Tobias Goevert, all the way from Hamburg via Zoom. And in the other presentation, parallel session, you can watch Sanne van Manen of NVRDV about the rooftop catalog and Jacob Steen Christensen of Yaya Architects. But here we will talk with Mattijs and Tobias. Welcome to the both of you. Very nice to have you here.
Hello, Tobias.
Hello. Let me introduce you. Mattijs van Ruijven, Head Urban Planning from the Municipality of Rotterdam. And Tobias Goevert, Director Regional and Urban Development from Hamburg. And this next 25-30 minutes, we will talk about planning, development, urban policies, how to work as a municipality on this layered city. What strategies, what policies do you use for this? First, talking about the layered city, a lot of densification. Both Hamburg and Rotterdam are growing in terms of population. Why is this so important? Is it purely densification for people? This building on this layered city?
No, I don't think so. We want to make the city more attractive. That's what we think is very important for the people that live and work and come and visit Rotterdam. And we have got climate change.
Yeah.
It's a big task, a big challenge, more sustainable energy. And rooftops are a fantastic opportunity to contribute to these aspects. So therefore, despite the densification, although it's also an opportunity for densification, of course, but we think it's very important to focus on rooftops as a city.
Yeah, rooftops and maybe also levels below the ground level, as we are here right now.
In a basement like this, well, I think rooftops are more attractive, although this is a really special place, of course.
Yeah.
But, yeah.
We'll talk about it in a minute. Tobias, welcome.
Hi.
Hello. We can hear you also in the studio. Nice to have you. Hamburg is also, I think, working on this layered city. How do you guys see it over there? What are the main ambitions or goals?
Well, first of all, thanks for inviting us, because we are great admirers of Rotterdam, and what I've seen so far and heard from Léon and your colleagues, it's been a fantastic day. And more to come. So Hamburg is a great friend of Rotterdam. Matthias and I have here and there already talked about urbanism and the reasons why we're doing our jobs. And I think in our case we have very interesting, steady, prosperous growth in a city that has got a lot of water around it. So it doesn't actually have space to grow in all directions, nor do we want that. We are intensifying places, and with that, of course, given we're a very green city as well, we don't want to take more green space. So we are looking very carefully at where we can put the growth, and of course, then the idea of looking at rooftops, looking at existing buildings, amending them, or indeed intensifying green spaces on top of roofs wherever possible has been one of our strategies for quite a while now. But I think climate change and the pressures on the city are only making that more important by the day. So we are actively working on implementing these policies, and we can talk a bit more about it in a minute.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you, Tobias. Well, you already mentioned both the rooftops and the use of rooftops, and you already implemented some designs. We have some in the presentation. Maybe we can take that on the screen as well, and we can briefly go through a few projects. This is first project in Rotterdam. Mattijs, what are we seeing here?
Well, this used to be a train station on an elevated train track through the city. Converted into a metro underground, so this wasn't needed anymore, and it's transformed into a park.
Yeah.
And the rest of the viaduct, will be part of the discussion today as well.
Definitely.
But it's one of our 7 city projects as a city, where we want to invest in to make it a fantastic park, a Rotterdam High Line, so to say. That's an interesting image. And this is an image of a park where we combined commercial activities, a dike to save for protection from the water from the river, and the need for space, for green space, and put it on top of one another. And it's a fantastic park for the community, but also for the city as a whole.
So it's combining social and green.
So there's commercial activity underneath, a parking garage. The dike is part of the whole structure, and we put a park as a municipality on top. So a combined development with the developer of the commercial program.
And we see the Groene Kaap here. It's a residency building, right? With also a green landscape on top, with this path you can walk over, a lot of green roofs and social spots in Rotterdam.
It is fantastic on Katendrecht Peninsula, and it's all connected, so you can walk through. And also, if you don't live there, you can visit it during the day. And yeah, that's something that the designers and the developer came up with, and we of course support it because it's a fantastic contribution to the city. Yeah.
Let's talk a bit later about how you really did do that, like supporting, you already saying. Hamburg also has some nice examples, I think. Tobias, you sent us some nice pictures. Could you tell us a bit more about your rooftop strategy you are working on in Hamburg?
Yes, we are steadily, like good Germans, building about 8 football pitches of green roofs a year over the last few years since the policies came along, and of course we don't have just housing projects, but this one is an old bunker that's been turned into a cultural venue, public roof garden, and a hotel as we speak. And it looks bonkers, but we love that sort of stuff. Not everything is as crazy as that. If you go to the next one, of course, mental health is really important for particularly an old aging population. So I think green roofs are really important in this case for an elderly people home. Example, if you go to the next one, you can see it's about people really. Here is just the roof of a university, and a lot of these extensive green roofs are being built, and here's a roof being provided for workers for their lunch break. I also think it's about that bringing together green space and work and recreation. And this is the sort of typical new housing developments, of which we're building about 10,000 homes a year, and most of them these days have got green roofs. But are they usable? Are they yet the exciting kind of places we want to have next? Last one for me for today is just the school with the playground, and I think the layered city is just about that. It's making the most of these upper level spaces, bringing fun and play onto it as well. Back to you.
Nice, very nice projects, and I see a lot of combinations between green and social activities. And I'm wondering, how did you do that? Had the municipality a supporting role, and how was that? Yeah, the question to the both of you. Do you take a leading role? What is the role of the municipality actually?
Well, here in Rotterdam, we try to make everyone enthusiastic for roofs. We've got a rooftop program to have multifunctional roofs to create awareness. Yeah. Also, there's in legislation, for example, the architectural committee also looks at the roof as a fifth facade. Mm-hmm. And we have also subsidies from the municipality, but also from the water board to create water storage or green roofs. But in the end, you also need people that really want it, developers or architects or homeowners or an apartment building group of owners that they want to contribute. Yeah. So it's that combination, I think, of policy and also making try to make people enthusiastic for this opportunity on the rooftops. Yeah.
So set ambitions, stimulating, supporting.
Exactly, and of course you've got many opportunities, and there we come in as a municipality where we can see, but perhaps in this neighborhood the water storage is a really big problem. Yeah. So perhaps you can keep it on your roof and then make it into the sewer system, but perhaps in another location it's more about more green or biodiversity, or perhaps a fantastic public roof for everyone. So you can have the conversation. We always say make it together here in the city. So that's what we do as a city in Rotterdam. So yeah.
Well, I'm curious how they do it in Hamburg.
Well, very organized way. We have lots of booklets. I'm holding some up here. They tell you exactly how to build these green roofs. They also have an online digital calculator to see how much funding you can get. And we've had funding programs since 2014 where you can get about half the cost of the green roofs, the extra costs paid. And also in that case, you can get some discounts on the water that you don't discharge into sewer, so you save some of the maintenance costs, to persuade the house owners and house builders to go for these green systems. But it's also increasingly law. And in addition to that, green walls and also solar systems have been prescribed now, so that everyone who's doing a new roof or redoing an existing one has to do a certain percentage of green roof and provide solar power. Of course, that then means, in terms of the policies that Matthias mentioned, it's about getting recreational use, getting rainwater storage, enhancing biodiversity, and this green energy point, which sometimes is conflicting with the use for people. Of course, you have to put more solar on. We all have to look at carbon neutral in not many years. So what are we going to do? Pack it all on the roof. So there's going to be a bit more competition on what goes on up there. But so I think the policies, which are very much backed by our politicians, are to make the most out of these roofs, to use them the most. But just in terms of facts, we have about 5% of all our roofs only 5% are green at the moment. So there's a lot more to do.
95% to go.
95% to go, exactly. Trying to get to 100 hectares in 10 years is our target. So you have to set yourself some ambitious targets. But we have built.
What are the targets? Do you know?
Well, our target would be we have built about 44 hectares of green roofs since the policy in 2014. And those 44 hectares, of course, get delivered by the public sector and the private sectors. 66%, so 2/3 of those are new buildings, and 1/3 are existing ones being converted. So that's about, that's 44 hectares. Is not bad. But as I said, if you take all the roofs that you could do, there's a lot more work ahead.
You were mentioning, Tobias, that you, as an owner, you could get a discount. As far as I know, here in Rotterdam, we only work with subsidies, whereas getting a discount on your annual bill from, say, the water board or the municipality is, of course, also quite a stimulant that you get in the long term, this discount for your green roof. Could you tell a little bit more about that?
Yeah, so it's, of course, the people who rent and live in these houses then have the benefits. So if you are someone who just builds housing, you don't keep it, then you don't benefit from it. But if you save 50% on your bills to the utilities that you'd have to pay for discharging rainwater into the sewer. We do have a charge for everything probably here. So I don't know how it's sorted in Rotterdam, but it also means that in our calculations, if you put a green roof on a building, then you will also save in the longer run on the maintenance, because other roofs have to be maintained more often.
Yes,
if you build these right. So that's just some of the innovations or the things being looked at here. But we're also, same as you probably do, an award for rooftops. We try to educate people, offer courses to train people on how to make green roofs, and there's lots of very well organized information around. But this is all just stimulants, really. We need to get the housing sector to be up for this, and they don't perhaps always see the value of also getting people publicly on these roofs. And I think one important point is that the cooperatives and the self-built sectors are usually the ones that understand, because they own the buildings longer term together, and they want to make use of the roofs. And they usually build some very good, fantastic roof terraces. So I think there's something about looking at the ways buildings are being delivered. And also, we have put about 7.5 million euros aside to do demonstration buildings for our schools. So we've got about 350 buildings for schools that will be receiving green roofs paid for to show the way.
Yeah.
I see a lot of collaborations also with health institutions. For example, we have a green rooftop in Rotterdam at the Erasmus hospital. You mentioned educational systems. And you also mentioned the water storage task the municipality has. So it really is a collaboration of different parties who will contribute on this transforming rooftops. do we have enough tools, regulations, I don't know, to really work on that together, to invest together and to get the benefits together?
Well, I think we can be more innovative. Like examples like Tobias was just mentioning. Of course, it starts by giving the right example. So just this week we announced a big green roof on top of one of our Philharmonie, the Philharmonie in Hamburg, but we've got a nice concert hall as well, put in a green roof, but also part of that is a public terrace where you can have educational facilities. So we can give the right example as a municipality. But in the end, I think it's solar panels, a subsidy, it's water board, it is a public program, or the social or the health benefit, and that's all different financial sectors. So I think the task that we have as a city, with the challenges that we have, and the combined challenges, really demand for a new system, a new way of getting all the financing as well, and also where do the benefits from the project, the green rooftop or whatever it is on the rooftop, where do the benefits go? Because that was mentioned by Tobias as well. Is it the homeowner or the one that rents it?
Exactly.
Or is it only for the municipality a big bill, or do we also get something in return? So that's something we have to work on, I think, and that's a challenge, I guess, for every city, also for Hamburg.
Yeah. And do you take a leading role in that, and talking to market parties, or is there a strategy really to build on that more? Or is it still really a search for?
Well, in every development, the rooftop is a big topic, of course, and not only from climate or attractivity or architecture, but also with energy, of course. So, but we can do more. But if there is an initiative, we step in. We step in.
You have great ambitions and great plans, and you really educate all the parties and citizens about that. I also was wondering, maybe not everyone will agree with me, but Hamburg and Rotterdam can be seen as maybe second cities, right? Like we have Amsterdam and then comes Rotterdam, we have Berlin and then comes Hamburg. Already said it, not everyone will agree. But does it also have an advantage to be this second city in terms of innovation, or I don't know?
It's not a topic for me. We focus on Rotterdam, of course. We, like I know my colleagues in Hamburg, I also know them in Amsterdam, of course. I think one benefit from Rotterdam is that we have a lot of, we are especially the city center, quite a new rebuilt city, and therefore a lot of flat, the bombing in the war, but therefore a lot of flat rooftops. And that, of course, are big opportunities. And we mainly focus on the lower rooftops, so not on the skyscrapers.
As Léon already said, the new tower is too high for trees and people.
Exactly. So the layers about 20 meters or 15 meters high. We call that the Rotterdam layer. It's really interesting. You have the contact with the streets. It's more less windy. So there's a really interesting layer, and then we have over 18 square kilometers in the city as a whole. That's also the port, but in the city center alone, we have got lots of square meters to use.
Yeah, and Hamburg, how do you, Tobias, in Hamburg, how do you see that being?
So there's actually almost like a football league of green roofs in Germany. I found out in doing my research, and even though Hamburg doesn't participate in it, which I find very sympathetic, we're about the fourth highest cities in comparison in terms of doing green roofs. Berlin is unfortunately not above us in that case. But you're right. If the focus on as a city is not necessarily on you being a political or tourism center, but a bit of everything. And I think Rotterdam and London Rotterdam and Hamburg very comparable. We have industry, we have places of production, we have water, we have tourism, and we're able to look at parts of the city to experiment and innovate. And And there's a great culture of innovation in both cities on trying things out. And example of a project we're doing is decking over an entire motorway to create a park. And it helps with noise, of course, for residents, but also it creates that kind of green space that's needed for the growing city. It also frees up community gardens then that we can move onto the motorway and create more buildings on the sides and urbanize parts of the city. So we are, in a way, we're both at the same point, we're looking at ways on how to accommodate more people in cities and how to intensify without sometimes the charm of all the kind of historic centers that perhaps Paris or other cities have got. We like that as second cities, if you want, and we enjoy that sort of room to experiment.
Yeah, that's nice. And that brings me to the next question, room to experiment. But where are we? Is it possible to say, like, where are we in the process of developing, activating, and transforming these rooftops? Are we at the beginning? Are we past the experimental phase? Or, what would you say?
Well, I think we've got nice examples of rooftops in Rotterdam for quite some years. Also, a film festival on rooftops, and but in the end, I think, well, we've only done like this, and we can achieve this.
Yeah.
So we've got a long way ahead. But I think we continue experimenting.
Yeah.
But I think we'll be doing it more professional as well, like we saw in some of the Rotterdam examples, and also the examples from Hamburg. In housing development, you see it more and more that it's standard because it's a quality for the people that will live there.
Yeah.
So I think it's not the first phase anymore, but we can achieve a lot more. So I think we've got to speed up.
Yeah, we've got to speed up to scale up.
Exactly. Yeah.
And in Hamburg, where are you? Would you say in the process?
I think we're doing okay with the green issue agenda, but are we doing okay with getting people up on roofs, and or are we actually accidentally taking some of the old buildings down that are leaving that room to experiment, where the roof terraces have popped up on old industrial buildings and where people just make some interesting space despite the planning? So we do need to look at that. And I don't know about you, but the best moments I've had, certainly at parties, was always on the roof, stargazing, dreaming, thinking about, looking at the horizon and getting that perspective onto the city. So we need to carry on. I'd love to do a day of rooftops or a week like you do. I think that concept is brilliant. It needs to be popular. Remember, the Beatles had their last gig on a roof in London, played their last concert, and I think we need to kind of take that opportunity. And in addition to solving all the technical issues and getting the funding in place and the boring stuff, also we need to be more into this community thing on getting people to use these rooftops, because I think education-wise, they really show people the city and where they are.
Yeah. And the next step, do you want to make a call of action? I don't know, citizens, for example, to get up on the roof, or market parties? What can we do tomorrow to work on this layered city?
Well, we as a city, together with MVIDV, you've got the catalog over there. We've got this rooftop catalog. Yeah. We think it's an inspiration for people in Rotterdam, but also in the whole world.
Yeah.
So we put an extra effort to show the possibilities of rooftops, and I think there will be a lot to come.
Yeah. Tobias, some last words, call to action, things you want to share?
So I want to see, particularly in our center, where we're going through so much change now with the retail sector, I want to see buildings being kept, grey energy, talking green, and also want those car parks, those multi-story car parks, to be used. The tops of them there's some brilliant cocktail bars in London, in Peckham on the car park on the top, and I want to get that sort of thing into our centers, move away from just retail and make it more fun. I think
Nice.
fun's the main thing here.
So we can visit. You visited Hamburg already, yeah. We will visit Hamburg maybe in a few years and see some new rooftop developments. And I think you are welcome to visit Rotterdam to see all the developments here. And you already mentioned it. We have this rooftop catalog. It was launched yesterday. The municipality made it together with the Rooftop Days Festival, MVRDV, and MVRDV. I can hand you one here.
Yeah,
in person, and Tobias, one will be sent to you, of course, to Hamburg. So you can get lots of inspiration of all what you can do on rooftops. Thank you very much for this conversation, and good luck with developing these rooftops and working on the layered city. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mattijs.
Bye, Hamburg.
Thank you, Sophie, and see
Bye,
you
Tobias.
soon, Matthias.
Yeah, see you soon, Tobias. Bye.
All right, thank you.
Yeah.
Then we'll go to the next part of the program. You can stay here in this session and have watch the new dialogue, or you can go, which I'll introduce in a second, or you can go to the other session and watch the presentations there. Irma van Oort, partner of KCRP, will elaborate on urban area development in a qualitative, inclusive and sustainable way on the long term. Or, and afterwards you can watch Arcades together with the city of Rotterdam as well. And they will launch a rooftop development, a tool that calculates the financial, ecological and social value of rooftops. How does it work? Who can use it? Well, have a watch or stay here, because next to me is already Dirk van Peijpe of the Urbanisten. And we have Robert Hammond on Zoom. And we will talk about these, transforming these former railroads in the city centers to exclusive, or not exclusive, to really, how do you say it, wonderful, inclusive, but wonderful railway parks. I will introduce you a bit more. Dirk van Peijpe, designer of the Rotterdamse Hofbogenpark. Co-founder of the Urbanisten, right? Yeah. And we have Robert Hammond on Zoom, I think. Hello, there you are. A co-founder and executive director of the High Line Park in New York City. Well, what can we learn from the Hofbogenpark, maybe of High Line Park, New York, which is a great success? Welcome. It's an honor to have you here in this studio. Hello, Robert. We will first have a short presentation of Dirk. I will give you this about, you made the design of the Hofbogenpark. Well, take us with you in the presentation, I guess. What will it be, and why will it be so inclusive?
Okay, thank you, Sophie, and thank you for AIR and the Rooftop Days for this invitation. It is one of my favorite festivals. It's a big honor also to have a consultation with Robert Hammond afterwards.
Yeah, definitely. We'll have a dialogue after
really
your
look forward to that.
presentation.
Well, and let's see if I can see the presentation.
I think they are busy with the presentation. Well, they will work it out. When did you start designing the Hofbogenpark? There it is.
We already have. Okay. See if this works as well. Otherwise,
It should work. Otherwise, you just say next slide.
Okay,
and then
next slide, please. All right. Maybe first to, for those who are not familiar with the Hofbogen, it's an elevated railway that was abandoned about 10 years ago. It's 2 kilometers long. It's more or less the same length as the High Line in New York. It's extremely small. It's only 8 meters wide. And it runs through around 5 quite densely populated districts in Rotterdam. Can I have the next slide then?
the next slide. Yes.
All right. Well, I've been up on the roof, and it's really fantastic. It's a spectacular walk. It's 2 kilometers long. It's obviously waiting for a future, as you can see.
Yeah.
And it not only provides a great walk, but also great views on the surrounding city.
Yeah.
So that's super. Can I have the next slide? All right. And at the same time, this on the ground floor, we have 2 stations. We have 189 arches that are occupied by entrepreneurs, most of them local entrepreneurs. So there's let's say the perfect condition for a park.
For a nice park. Still, yeah.
Well, then about the project, let's start by saying that that is part of the 7 city projects, as mentioned before, le grand projet, as the French would say. And for the Hofbogenpark, there's a budget of 35 million euros available, and with a specific perspective to combine the densification with the greening of the city, to also address urgent agendas like climate adaptation, the increase of biodiversity in cities, and a healthy city. So that's what we want to achieve. And there's also then the plan, design, which is a conceptual design. So we're now elaborating on that. And when you introduced me, I'm not the only designer. I have a team. I have a team of the Urbanisten, to mention them first. Yeah. But we also closely work together in the team with DS landscape architects and the Dak Doctors. Yeah. The project is commissioned by both the municipality as well as Dudok, who is the owner of the line. So then we have all the introduction there, and then I think we could go to the content. Let me first stress that the Hofbogenpark want to focus on 3 specific issues or themes, how you will call them. The first is to make it a network park, and I think that's interesting. Later in the conversation with Robert, therefore I highlighted these 3. It's a network park to start with. Explain later. It's also a nature inclusive park. That's an important agenda, and it's a climate adaptive. Sometimes I more call it climate sensitive. So that are the 3 main themes that we integrate in the design. After next, well, the network park is very simple. It's 2 kilometers and it's 6 meters, so it's simply too small for a serious park. It's too wide for a path. So we need the environment. We need the surrounding streets and parks and squares to really have a park environment. And so not only connect them, but also make them part of the intervention. So as you can see on this slide, this is a section that we took, the small roof park that we have, but also the streets that are surrounded, the facades that play a role, to depave them and to make them also part of this park experience, and also increase the quality of life on the ground level. As you can see, we have wide sidewalks with outdoor eating. We have a different mobility priority, so more space for pedestrians and bikes. And so that's the first theme I want to emphasize. The second one is to make it all inclusive. So when you talked about inclusiveness, you might talk about people of different ages or different colors or cultures and so on. But when I say all inclusive, I also mean nature inclusive. And for me, nature inclusive means that we are no longer apart from nature, but that we are part of nature. And if we consider yourself part of nature, you also have to design for nature. And in this case, we design a park that is also an environment, a welcome space for our animal friends. And that starts with insects like bees and butterflies, toads, birds, but also the hedgehog. And it means that we also bring them up the roof and to connect them to larger ecological structures that are around in the city. And by making this network park really a nature inclusive environment as well. And the last theme is the water sensitive or the climate sensitive approach, in which a Delta city like Rotterdam really needs to perform. In this case, we bring rainwater. It's basically a concept of a sponge city. The rainwater to the roof for purification that goes along with the landscape. So we have a biological cleaning, and then we store the water in an aquifer to be reused. With the next slide, to be reused in the park in many different ways at other moments. So you can, for instance, play with it. This is sort of placemaking, but you can also water the plantations and so on. I have to move forward, otherwise we don't have the conversation.
Exactly.
but there's the information is available on websites.
Yeah.
So it's a park for all, and it means that that this is just a composition of one of the segments.
Yeah.
That we have a path, a continuous path. It's around 2 meters wide. We have a continuous vegetation as well. And we have special platforms, and platforms are basically there for activities for people to go up on the roof, to have a cup of coffee, to access exposition, or for other more flexible point of views. I think that's the shortest presentation I ever did.
About a 2 kilometers park.
Yeah,
That's thank you very much for your presentation, Dirk. Go back to Robert, I would say. Robert, you had this vision, foresight to lead the effort to build an elevated park on an abandoned railway line in New York about 20 years ago. Is that correct?
22.
Yeah. Sorry?
22.
22 years already. Well, and the first phase was completed in 2009, right? Yeah. Well, I was with my father in New York at 2011. Back then, we had an old magazine about New York, maybe, but it wasn't that well known back then. Yeah. And we had this great surprise when we came up there. I just saw it walking on the street, the busy roads, and then we went up and there was this amazing park. It is a great success, right? In 2019, there were 8 million visitors. That's a lot. Well, did you expect this great success of the High Line Park?
I mean, I didn't, I'm a dreamer, but I'm also a realist. So I never thought it would actually happen at all. So, I remember my mom asked when I started it, she said, what are the chances of it happening? And I said 1 in 100. So, but if it happened, I thought people would like it. I didn't think 8 million people, I'm putting that in perspective. I think that's almost what the Louvre gets. I mean, I think they get maybe 9 million people pre-COVID. And, I think the Louvre is 40 times our size. We're a very, very small little park. So it's actually, a lot of the issues we deal with are over-success issues.
Yeah.
So it's sort of different. They're good problems, but they're interesting to solve. A lot of times we look to Europe because a lot of European cities are also struggling with this over success of tourism.
So that's also some kind of risk, even maybe. Can I put it like that? Or risk is something you have to work with, right?
Yeah, the risk.
The risk. Well, you call it an over success.
Yeah.
But it's something we have to work with. And let's. Yeah, sorry. Oh, well, let's discuss that in a minute, because first, of course, I want maybe you can give a reaction to these plans of the Hofbogenpark. What do you think of it?
Yeah, I mean, I've been following this project for a long, long time. I can't remember. I was trying to look on my phone. One of my favorite Instagram posts was this speeded up tour through it. It was just a very fast. And so, I'm really excited about your design and that it's actually moving forward. I'm excited to come visit. I feel like, especially people in Europe, in particular your country, got the High Line before a lot of New Yorkers or Americans did. Because to me, I think a lot of Americans, when they see something old or something industrial, the idea is to tear it down and build something beautiful.
Yeah.
And I think Europeans understood way before Americans the beauty in our industrial past.
And we see the quality in it, you might say. Yeah. And well,
one other thing that I'm really excited about your design is that we always wanted to capture the water. Our thought was, could we capture the water? We have a really deep structure.
Wow! Those are the benefits of Zoom.
So there, you can see that big I-beam. So we thought, could we capture the water in between those planks? And so we could use the water, recycle it to water the plants. But it was going to be there's so many I-beams. The tanks were going to have to be relatively small, and we were going to have so many of them. wasn't efficient. So I'm so glad that you're actually, figuring out to make these projects more ecological. Because I think the other thing is, the great thing about these projects, that people look at the High Line and think, oh, but now you have a chance to do something better. And so the next people that come along can copy this project, not the High Line.
So how is it going to be better?
Well, that's true ambition, Anna.
Yeah.
Well, you're saying it's a better. You have a better. Our runoff water, it goes into the planting, but if you have too much in the planting, it just goes into our sewage system.
Yeah.
You're looking at really figuring out what's a better use of how to deal with that water, and that's what people are going to need to do in the future. They can't waste that water runoff anymore.
No. Definitely, and you made a plan for that already. Maybe we can go into that a bit later, because I also really would like to talk about this, going through all the different neighborhoods, because there are some things really to work on, as I might say it correctly. So maybe we could ask Robert, what are lessons learned on High Line Park regarding safety, nuisance, privacy, and that kind of stuff?
Yeah, I mean, we had it easier because when we built the High Line, this was an industrial neighborhood. So there were like 3 apartments next to the High Line. So
how did they react?
Easier. So now there are many, many apartments, but they moved in after it was built, which is much easier because you're buying or renting an apartment and you know what you're getting. It's harder when you have something that is coming, you already have your privacy and you're going to lose some of it. I mean, we do find that people self-select. Some people like that view going both ways. I've heard people say that, who wants a view where you don't see anything happening? They get to view, but you have to live with people seeing in too. In terms of safety, I mean, it's one of the benefits of the success is we've had very few crimes because it's so busy. It's also not a great place to commit a crime on an elevated walkway because it's, you got to run one way to get out. I mean, it's just not we have cameras. And so we have very, very little crime.
Yeah. If you want to ask a question, Dirk, feel free to do so.
Maybe just make it into a conversation, because what I do recognize is that that when you compare with the High Line, you look at the success that you can that is both ways. So basically finding a new balance. And what I experienced during the year that we were designing, to really also get in touch with the community, is that. And on one hand, everyone is really in need of this park space. So everyone wants the park. Yeah. But then you start looking at, okay, how can we not only involve the community, but how can we maintain it a park for everyone? Yeah. Make it all inclusive, and then the High Line becomes also, I wouldn't call it a nightmare, but it's definitely not a reference anymore when it comes
for the Hofbogenpark.
Yeah, because then it's about crowd managing the enormous amount of visitors.
8 million visitors on the Hofbogenpark.
Yeah. And I think Robert made this point that starting the High Line, there were 3 apartments, you said, along the line. Well, in this context, there's the track is really running through the districts, and sometimes we really get close to the people that used to have a room on a railway line, because it's already an improvement.
A vacant space.
But still, there's the question: can we have a quiet environment for ourselves? So how to deal with privacy and this kind of issues. So that's a design task. That's definitely one thing. But it's also really about how to maintain it, how to organize,
maintain and operate
the management
the park
of the
itself
park afterwards. And that's really why we also want to learn from Robert. How do you do that? For instance, how do you control crowds? Is there a way of doing? How do you organize your park management when the park is there? And that's still something that we have to discover the coming period.
What are the main lessons learned, Robert, regarding this, like crowd management and maintenance, operate the whole park?
Well, I mean, that's where something with COVID has actually been, there's been a silver lining, is we had to close when COVID first happened because the High Line was so crowded, we couldn't keep people any distance. I mean, again, then we didn't know it was okay to be outside. And then when we reopened, we did timed entry. So it was free timed entry. So you could go online, get a free ticket, or you could just walk up as well. And we had about half the people making timed entry, half the people walking up. But we were able to reduce the numbers. And we did it for safety, but what happened is New Yorkers got the High Line back for them. There weren't any tourists and it wasn't crowded. It was like an experience. It was an experience we really never had. And the other thing, even the planting reacted differently. Because, we have these, can't see them. We have the planks sort of come in and the planting is meant to grow up between the planks. But we had so many people, if, 1 in 1,000 person steps on this, it just kills the plant.
Yeah.
And the plants just receded, or if one person picks a plant, the planting just moved back. You didn't even notice it because it never grooved in. And so for the first time, the planting actually grew between the planks and the planting started coming in. I mean, you can even just see it. I mean, because without those number of visitors, and we still had 1 million visitors last year. It wasn't like no one, it just wasn't 8 million. And so people had a better experience because it wasn't so crowded. So right now, we're experimenting. Do we keep the timed entry during certain parts of the year or certain days? Right now we have timed entry on part, and then, sorry, I keep moving and then part, we don't have timed entry. So, that's what we're experimenting with. Again, looking to Europe, Part Gal has, been through this. I mean, it's really, I think now cities want everybody back. And at a certain point, people are going to come back, and it's not just the High Line that's going to have to deal with this. Whole neighborhoods have to deal with these issues.
Yeah. But how do we make it really an inclusive park if we have time slots or entrance?
It became more inclusive. It became more diverse.
Sorry?
It became more diverse.
Diverse. And
so we had more people of color, more Latinx, more Black people come. The percentages increased with timed entry. So it was something we really worried about, but it actually got more people from outside Manhattan, the other 4 boroughs that we have in New York, came to the High Line. So it was something we're so happy to see that I think because people just felt like it was a tourist attraction.
Is it something you want for?
Well, no, we're still, and I really think it's good to see if we can learn from Robert. It's just something that we still are discovering how to do that. And I think one thing, what we know, it's going to be a public park, so it's going to be accessible for everyone who wants to access the park. We also know that there probably will be a closure in the evening hours, so that in the evening we switch off the lights. You can't enter.
That's one of the great things that makes it safe is most parks you can't close because it's hard to gate them off. And so it's a real, that's made our life much easier.
Yeah, I think that's really necessary. And there's also not a real discussion about that. But and then of course the question is, what can you do in the design phase? What we do try is to organize going from the city center to the north, to also a little bit from the more crowded, dense center to the residential districts. And we try to program as much as possible accordingly. So the offline station, which is already a park, is more suitable for smaller events, for instance. And we get to the Soho district where there's a lot of developments going on. There's students already there. So we provide them with what we call platforms that make it possible to work or study. There's free Wi-Fi and a canopy. And the more you go to the north, the more relaxed the plan is, the more natural it becomes. There's a little more water coming in. So we try to organize a little bit like that. In the design phase, we try to work with the vegetation, with the height of plantation, that we really need good soil to have a sort of a filter between houses and people walking on the line.
Yeah.
So that's what we can do. And I think that's important to do that right now in the design phase, discuss this park management issue. And one thing that the group that is studying that is doing right now is saying, well, we need a park manager.
Yeah.
And I think there's also something to learn from the High Line. They have the Friends of the High Line. So it's about how to organize this. And well, in Rotterdam, and I think in the Netherlands, at the moment, the maintenance of public space is really siloed. So you have a different department for the cleaning of the streets, for the maintenance of the green, for the pavement, for safety, and so on and so on. So the first thing that I think we need to do, just like in New York, is to bring that into one organization. Otherwise, you can't maintain the roof like this. You don't have all these different services coming up at different times. So that's the first thing that we are looking at right now. And the funding definitely is an issue then, because it also needs to combine maintenance funds that are now really siloed as well.
Yeah.
And last but not least, I think it's important, and maybe talk about that as well with Robert, is how to involve the local community, both the entrepreneurs as well as the people that live there or that study there, how to involve them, not only in the design, because they're involved in the design at the moment, but also how to involve them in
the
maintaining the park, which is not just saving money, but it's just providing, let's say, healthy activities or increasing the involvement of people. They really lack good green spaces to relax and enjoy, but it's also nice to be actively involved in them. So we're also looking at that.
Yeah, I saw Robert nodding a lot, so.
No, I mean, it's the biggest thing is, in some ways, opening and building is the easy part, maintaining it is the really difficult part, because it's not as sexy to most people. So people think it'll just happen. And I completely agree that you need one group doing it because it's so complex. So we are an independent, I guess you would call us a public-private partnership, a PPP or a nonprofit or an NGO. That manage and operate the park for the city. So, but the bad news is we have to raise all the money. So we don't get any city or public money to operate it. We got public money to build it, but we didn't get public money to operate it.
Yeah, and that's definitely a big difference, Robert. But although there's also a lot of financing of green structures in Manhattan that come from private funding, isn't it?
Yeah, yes, but there's not, it doesn't, it's hard to get operation funding.
Yeah.
It's easier to get capital to build it, but no one likes paying to maintain bathrooms.
Well, I think we learned, for instance, from the water square in Rotterdam that we realized together, which also about the maintenance. That it's really important if you integrate that you also can combine the funding that is now separated as well. So you can do, I think, more with the same amount of money, just simply by breaking down the silos and bring that into one park management system. But it's new in Rotterdam. There's some experiments going on. So this is definitely something that we. And not me, because I'm more responsible for the design, but it's definitely.
Yeah, and things we maybe can learn from the High Line then. Do you have one last question for Robert? Yes, because we have to round up this dialogue conversation.
No, I wouldn't have a question. It would just be an invitation that when it's possible that Robert can really visit the Rotterdam High Line in probably 3 years, 2-3 years.
Yes.
That was not my question, but an invitation.
Well, and I was just reading this weekend Pete Uldorf's new book about his garden at Humelo, and so it made me want to go back and visit that. And I put a link in the chat about our High Line network. So we have a network of 50 infrastructure reuse projects across North America. Because sometimes, again, what's most helpful is not how we did it, but how people are doing it going forward. And so one of the things is we want to be able to share that knowledge with each other, because we have as much to learn at the High Line. Once you figure out how to manage it, you can tell us better ways for us to manage it.
So in a few years, when we have another knowledge day, you will go into conversation again, maybe physically in Rotterdam.
And I hope to keep in touch in the coming period, because there's a lot to learn. And so if it's okay for Robert, let's say we will maybe online meet very soon to learn a little bit more outside this program.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much. And I think this was a very nice first conversation. Or was it the first? Did you?
I've been on the line, but I never met Robert.
Perfect. Well, I think it was a great start then. Thank you very much. And
congratulations. Very exciting to see.
Thank you. Well, the congratulations are to you, of course. I'll give you the rooftop catalog, and Robert, this rooftop catalog with a lot of things what you can do on rooftops. It was launched yesterday. Will be sent to you in New York. Great. And good luck with
one more thing just to show people, because it's worth, when we're talking about, this is Little Island that just opened in New York. It's a new park built out on the piers right across from the High Line, and it's I was a skeptic. I was not a fan, but it's actually wonderful. So another example of how people are thinking differently.
We could talk a lot more about all the great examples and developments, but thank you very much again, and hope to see you back again, the both of you, and good luck, Dirk, with further design of the Hofbogenpark.
Thanks very much.
Thanks a lot.
All right.
Well, thank you. We will. You're dismissed. Well, you can stay here and watch the program, but we will go on to the next program. We have a very tight schedule. You can stay here again or switch to the other session. There, Robert Winkel of Maas Architects will talk about sustainable development. This layered building in wood, Sawa in Rotterdam, first fully wooden residential building of 50 meters high in Rotterdam, with generous green terraces, enhancing the biodiversity of the neighborhoods and developing a really sustainable layered city. And after Robert Winkel, Karel van der Venne will talk about the Muse and Casanova, two residential high-rise buildings within the city center of Rotterdam that are designed in symbiosis with each other, with a shared green garden on the 5th level. But you can also stay here for our next dialogue. I welcome Erwin Heurkens here in the studio.
Thank you, Sophie.
And well, for other dialogues, I say you will go into conversation, but we already had this pre-recording earlier, but that in a minute. We are very happy that you are here again in the studio. You are an assistant professor in urban development management at the Faculty of Architecture and the Built Environment Department, Management in the Built Environment, Technical University of Delft. Delft University of Technology, I have to say. You were actually one of my teachers when I studied there. And now I can learn even more from you in this new role. And your work, your academic work, focuses on sustainable private sector-led urban development projects. A lot of words.
Yes, quite a mouthful, all of these things.
Exactly, yeah. And we are going to talk about American instruments we may use for densification, right?
Yeah.
What can we learn from now? Well, we just saw this conversation with Robert Hammond. Winy Maas in his opening statement already mentioned air rights. And it's a bit complex, maybe. So you will start with a short presentation as well, and we'll see if the technique will work. The presentation will be shared, and we'll have a watch if you can click it yourself. All we have to
see if I see it. Somebody probably has to put it up.
We'll put the presentation. Here is the Hofbogenpark. So, and the High Line
Beautiful
Park.
pictures of the High Line.
Beautiful pictures, right? And yeah,
Yes.
there we have the High Line Park again.
Yeah. Well, thank you very much, Sophie, and the whole organization for inviting me here. Yeah, there's been a nice conversation yesterday, but we will see that later on. I was asked to tell you something about, let's say, American instruments for densification, which in this case involve air rights and upzoning. And we do this because of, let's say, that there are legal possibilities also to increase the density of the city, and at the same time also a sustainable layered city by looking at this from a more instrumental point of view. I hope the rest is in English, and maybe just the first slide was a problem. Yes, it's in English. So excuse me for the first slide. If you think about urban planning in the US, in America, I think also the previous presenters already discussed it a little bit. It's pretty much neoliberal and market-oriented or economy-oriented. So there's always a competition going on between cities for, let's say, jobs, for people, talent coming into these cities. And at the same time, you see that there are a lot of innovations coming from these cities, right? So new ideas about urbanity we can also learn from. But I will focus more on the more legal aspects. So if you think about the planning system, it's kind of similar to what we see in the Netherlands. So there are zoning plans to regulate urban development and even form-based codes, spatial quality kind of design rules. But there's also a lot of stimulation of, let's say, the market. So incentivizing the market to build, for instance, more sustainable or to densify cities. And this can be done by air rights, upzoning, but also tax breaks. These are the instruments that are in place. And more generally, I think that it's quite important also to understand what goes on in the US. What we can learn from it in Rotterdam is that there's quite an entrepreneurial government, public sector that actually competes, as I said, for companies to come to their cities. So they take an entrepreneurial role, and the private sector is in the lead in general, and they will look a bit further than just making this return. Of course, returns and profit are important, but they'll also look at, let's say, what they can do with citizen participation. It's quite an integral part of their way of working. And for instance, they will also develop POPs, so privately owned public spaces. And probably already saw some examples, or you have discussed this previously. So there's quite a broad role for the private sector. And what I like to term here is that they're always looking for a combination of realizing public goals and private returns. And that's underneath also the instruments which I'm going to discuss right now. This will work. I have to push harder. Oh, there it is. There it is. There are actually three. They're related. Air rights, that's the most important thing. That's the right granted by a property owner to a buyer to use the space above an existing right-of-way, so above their own building they own, or other adjacent site. And usually that's then used for real estate development somewhere else. And that has to do with the transfer of those development rights. So that's a mechanism to relocate this potential development from one area to another. And then the donor area is the area where development is not, let's say, allowed to take place. And the receiver side, there you can actually build. This then often involves, of course, a building in let's say, higher. And this then has to do with incentive and upzoning, which is a rule in the zoning ordinance. And that's actually establishing a fixed maximum building height for certain areas into the zoning plan, which then the public parties will use to request private development contributions. So exchange for this private developer contributions, for instance, developing public space or paying for a certain fund, for instance, for social housing. In exchange for that, they will be allowed to exceed this maximum amount of development. And I've also included a scheme, which indicates this maybe a bit more easily. If you go from 1 to 5, in the first phase, you, for instance, see a museum, and there's a maximum height, the as of right height that can be built normally. If you go to step 2, there's of course a proposed development, might be a proposed development for this site, but this is not really likable to happen, right? So it's a virtual kind of allowance. What then happens is that there's a possibility for development elsewhere. And this possibility of this site disappears, but it can be transferred to the adjacent site where someone else, a buyer or a developer, wants to build higher, or at a different site or different area. Mostly it's adjacent to a site. And then you see in number 5 that there is this transfer of air rights, and then you see these slim towers often being realized in New York. Here's an example of what can happen. This is a tower in Seattle. You see on the right, I'll try to make this clear for you. Hopefully this works. With small, oh, it didn't. Let's go back. I will explain in general. There's, I think, a 27-story is the as of right height that this developer is allowed to build. And then there are a couple of floors, different floors are added with different developer contributions. So in exchange for developing one floor, the developer agrees to add, for instance, a public plaza around his building, or it agrees to add money for instance, a childcare or daycare on site or off site. And this is the way that you can actually build higher as a developer. So contributing also to the rest of the city. Okay, then last slide. So what is the potential now of these instruments for the Netherlands of Rotterdam? I think if we talk about these two themes, supporting densification, this is a possibility to increase that densification, increasing the heights in this case, but also make, let's say, more difficult, underdeveloped or less feasible sites profitable, because you can go higher. These most, let's say, the higher upper levels of these high-rise are more lucrative in a sense. This then can be indeed developed. Can it support a sustainable layered city? I think it can, because it could trigger private developer contributions. You can negotiate with these developers to establish, let's say, functions like an active rooftops, attractive plazas, green squares, affordable housing, social initiatives, all these kind of things. So in essence, this is possible. There is, of course, a different context. So you have to think about what changes need to be established in law. I think it's not that difficult. Municipalities could, in their land use plan, omgevingsplan, set such a building height, a maximum building height for certain areas, but also introduce this mechanism, so the rules in an amendment. And there can be interior agreements we already use. Those are private law agreements, where you negotiate and secure these developer contributions in, let's say, negotiation between the developer and the municipality. And in a way, of course, this is a complete different practice. So there are a lot of, let's say, more intangible reasons why maybe this could not happen. But I think it's interesting for us to explore also in the city of Rotterdam that these principles might, be part of a pilot and see what actually can be established.
Perfect.
That's the end of my presentation.
Thank you, Erwin, for this presentation. That clarifies it a lot, I would say.
I hope so, yeah.
And now we will watch a pre-recorded conversation between Erwin Heurkens and Stefan Al, I have to say.
Yeah.
Erwin Heurkens, thank you for the presentation. And now we will move to the dialogue, to the conversation with Stefan Al. Originally a Dutch architect, but now a New York-based architect and urban designer, founder of Stefan Al Architects. We are very happy to have you here, Stefan. Unfortunately, we couldn't do this live on Friday. We're very happy to have you here now to do this pre-recording. And before you and Erwin will go into conversation, can I ask you first, who are you exactly and what kind of work do you do in New York?
Yeah, thank you for the invitation. First of all, really excited to be here. Like you said, I'm originally from the Netherlands. I went to school in Delft. So I visited Rotterdam many times, and it was very inspirational for me. I really see it as an architectural and urban playground, testing so many ideas that are quite influential worldwide. So I think we can be all very proud of the legacy that Rotterdam has in terms of architecture, urban design, and urban planning. So I left the Netherlands to pursue a PhD in city planning at the University of California, Berkeley. And ever since, I've I've kind of worked more globally, first in Hong Kong and now in New York. So I work on kind of large-scale projects here, but also in Asia. And then I teach at several universities. And I just finished a new book precisely on this topic, which will come out in April. It's called Super Tall: How the World's Tallest Buildings Are Reshaping Our Cities and Our Lives. So yeah, it's a topic I'm very interested in, and yeah, would love to discuss with you and Erwin what this could potentially mean with air rights and transferable development rights for the city of Rotterdam.
Nice to hear. So you traveled around the world and now in New York, an expert on air rights. I will give the word to Erwin, and you can go into this conversation. You are the expert, so I will only be here when needed. But Erwin.
Thank you very much, Sophie. Hi, Stefan. Nice to meet you again. Although this is online, the last time we met was in New York. I remember our conversations. We didn't talk that much about air rights, actually, but now we're here about this topic. From your own experience, what is the purpose of these air rights, actually, and let's say the other instruments for New York itself? So, what kind of need does it fulfill?
Well, it's very useful here in New York City because of the high density, and I think many other cities that aspire to high density have things they can learn from the New York situation. But ironically, air rights started because of concern of the right of the land below ground. A couple centuries ago, there was a court case because one landowner felt that his neighbor had infringed on his property by digging a hole and burying 2 barrels of herrings. So ever since they decided that if you own the land, you also own the land underneath it, as well as the land all the way up. And they use the term ad infinitum, which means infinitely. Now, about 100 years ago with air flight, that's kind of those air rights were challenged because, how can you fly through someone's private property, right? If you have unlimited air rights. So they redefined it as kind of the areas that are actually occupiable. So that put a cap on that. It was really quite useful for the city of New York. The first case of it was Grand Central when they built the kind of main train station in New York. It's very important for the city of New York. All the suburbs go into this station, and per year or per day, there's about 1 million jobs within a 20-minute walk within the station. So it's incredibly busy. A lot of commuters go there. But when it was first built, the train developer realized they couldn't build above the tracks or above the station. So they were allowed to kind of sell those rights and build kind of elsewhere. And they did that through several very important buildings, like the Chrysler building was part of that. This is the Waldorf Astoria. So that was the first case. So it allowed, let's say, developers to capitalize on land they couldn't use, and they capitalize on it elsewhere. But there's more, many more cases that highlight the benefits of air rights. But I would say that it's also a somewhat controversial topic in New York City, because recently, over the past 10, 15 years, we've seen what we call the super slenders, these extremely thin pencil towers that are more than 1,000 feet tall, but are nevertheless on a very small plot of land. And the only reason that's possible is because of the transfer of development rights. So in 1961, they did a big zoning overhaul in New York City. And that's when they made it easier to transfer development rights, so to transfer air rights. Before, you could only use the air rights above your own property. But ever since, it was much easier to sell them. So what's happening now is that there's some pieces of land that are relatively kind of worthless. Let's say, you know, you're 1 block away from Central Park, but you can't see Central Park. Suddenly you can buy up air rights from, you know, far away. You can assemble them all on a tiny site, and you can suddenly punch a hole into the sky, right? And create these super slenders that are more than 1,000 feet tall. So now if you look at the south of Central Park, 57th Street, there's about a handful of them, but there's many more throughout the city. But they're really visible in the skyline. So many New Yorkers are objecting to this. They don't like it that they're casting big shadows on Central Park. You know, here we have the world's tallest towers, these extremely slender towers that are just used for kind of billionaires' playgrounds. So it's quite controversial as well. But there's many kind of good examples, I would say, that we can speak about, including Grand Central Station in terms of air rights and the transfer of them.
So I actually like the fact that you say there are also some downsides, right, to this instrument. But if you think about, let's say, the benefits for the city, if you does this resonate? These public and private interests, do they come together? For instance, does this air rights and this transfer of development rights and these upzoning mechanisms, do they allow for instance, good public space that otherwise would not have been developed, for instance?
Yeah, I'll give you 2 examples. The first on the transfer of development rights, a good example, and then the second, an upzoning example. The first example reminded me of the diagram you showed and how the transfer of development rights work. So I see you have a building there. It looks like Grand Central Station, but if you imagine the High Line there, right? Everyone knows the High Line. It's this elevated park. So about 15, 20 years ago, they decided to turn this elevated freight line, freight rails that was no longer being used, and turn it into a public park. What they did was, well, there was all these kind of air rights that were right above them or immediately adjacent to the park. If all that would have been built, there would have been no sunlight on the High Line. So by allowing the transfer of these rights to kind of a little bit further away from the park, this helped kind of enabling the success of the High Line. And right now, it's actually the most visited tourist attraction in New York City, more than the Museum of Modern Art or the Statue of Liberty. So that really helped the success of the High Line. So in a way, it allows the city to kind of sculpt the skyline, right? But still do it in a transparent way. So it doesn't really rely on negotiations. It's just kind of a mechanism that everyone understands once it's put in place. The second example, and it has to do with upzoning.
Could you do that very briefly, Stefan, just because of the time? It's very interesting though, but just so we can discuss some other topics.
Yes, the upzoning, most recently Midtown was upzoned in Manhattan, which is an office district. However, the supply of the office space was kind of subpar, and the city realized they needed to invigorate this. At the same time, the city realized that a lot of the public transit access was subpar. So they upzoned the area and they gave incentives to developers to go higher, to build extra stories if they would help fund transit improvements. So let's say disability elevators into the subway system. So here's a clear example of upzoning and the city exchanging public benefits, in this case, transit improvements, in exchange for the right to build, let's say, 6 stories higher.
That's very interesting, especially because, of course, here in Rotterdam, we're looking towards what this could bring in terms of densification, but also the usage of rooftops. Do you think this instrument could contribute to that, or these instruments? So do you see examples in New York, for instance, where there are contributions from developers to activating rooftops or building on top of rooftops?
Yeah, no, that's a good question. So actually, in terms of the rooftops, they are being regulated in New York City, and they're actually kind of forcing developers, if the roof is not too steep, to develop either photovoltaics or a green roof. So there are regulations in place that enforce that. But in terms of kind of providing public rooftop access, that doesn't exist. On the other hand, ever since the 1960s, there is a regulation that enables the private sector to build public space, so-called privately owned public spaces, in exchange for development rights. So if you go through New York, you see that there are many parks, many plazas that are actually not owned or maintained by the city. These are private plazas, but they have public access. Developers built them because the city realized there wasn't enough open space. They didn't want to pay for it themselves. So here they helped kind of incentivize developers to build this kind of ground level public space in exchange for extra stories.
I think these POPs, as we call them, right? They are an interesting phenomenon. We don't see them that much in the Netherlands. We have them in, let's say, retail locations or in business parks. We have similar kind of constructions like BIDs, but not at a scale like New York. Nevertheless, it's interesting for us to learn from. But more in general, to kind of summarize, what is the main lesson you can draw, or you would like to formulate, or tip you could give, or advice to Rotterdam in their, let's say, high-rise and densification ambitions?
Well, I think there's two lessons. The first is that it helps when there's transparency for developers. So setting out rules that are clear for everyone. So it doesn't rely on negotiations. For instance, London, the skyline, as you know, with all the view corridors, and it's actually quite complicated for developers to build high rises. They don't know exactly what's going to get passed and what doesn't. In New York, it's quite clear, although it's complex. I mean, the zoning regulations, there are more than 1,000 pages in New York City alone, and still there's lots of ambiguity, and it's very complicated. Nevertheless, it's quite clear. So that helps developers as they go about it. It reduces the risk and uncertainty for them. The second thing is the quid pro quo. You can get something out of this as a city. So let's say you want transit improvements. Let's say you want public space. Let's say you want active rooftops. You can incentivize this through handing out extra development rights. So there are some lessons here in New York. I would say there are other lessons too, other cities like Singapore, for instance. I've been following the landscape replacement area regulation quite carefully, which forces developers to build sky parks, sky gardens, green walls, etc. So the idea is that because they're occupying a site, that site is lost. It can no longer be green. Developers need to replace that greenery elsewhere in the city. So I think Singapore is a good example too, but New York for sure has lots of lessons for Rotterdam.
Thank you very much, Stefan. I learned a lot from your knowledge, your international experience as well to this topic. So thank you. I hope we all learned something.
We definitely learned a lot, I would say. So thank you also.
Thank you very much.
And a rooftop catalog will be sent to you with lots of opportunities how to build on rooftops. So maybe also in New York, air rights in time will be used to activate all these rooftops. I'm very
Fantastic.
curious. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thanks a lot. And yeah, have a lot of success in New York, and also with publishing your book or promoting your book. Is it already published?
In April next year.
April. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, success, and hopefully we'll see you another time again. Thank you.
Sounds good. All right. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
So that was the conversation. Before there was still construction site, there was construction workers in the back, and now we are here again live this Friday, June 4th, together with Erwin. But thanks again of course, to Stefan, who, very clear explained, I think, also with some examples. But that brings us back to Rotterdam. Erwin, hearing all these examples, these lessons, these insights, are there specific spots maybe in Rotterdam you think are, it could work for?
Yeah. If you think in general about Rotterdam and the main idea now of developing these different, let's say, cities within the city, right? So around Rotterdam Alexander or Kop van Zuid, station area, those are maybe potential areas which are economically most interesting, right?
Yeah.
But also,
and when are they economically most interesting?
Because they're well accessible, for instance, and there's of course then a need to house people in those locations from a sustainability point of view. If you're very closely to these transportation hubs.
Yeah.
If you look at the central station with this connection to European cities, of course that's a brilliant location from an economic point of view. But financially, sometimes they're difficult, right? Because there are high land prices, and that generally then results in real estate or housing, for instance, which are not that affordable. So if you think about sustainable layered cities, applying air rights in these areas could also help finance, let's say, maybe more affordable homes in those kind of neighborhoods, but also increase the quality of public space. So the municipality doesn't necessarily have to develop this and finance this with Ineco money, as they do probably right now, but also together with developers. So they benefit both from these investments.
Yeah, yeah. So these dense spots, and do we also need, or do we have enough market pressure in Rotterdam for these instruments?
That's a good question. Of course, it's incomparable to New York, where there's a lot of demand for new accommodation in general. But nevertheless, such a principle could, regardless of, let's say, the economic circumstances, I think that could work.
Yeah.
But you have to then not apply this to the entire city, for instance, like they do in New York. In every zoning plan, there's such a rule. Here you might say, let's make this for certain omgevingsplannen, right? So environmental plans. And then that might work. But you can also say, let's do a pilot and see what the effects are of such a measure, right?
Yeah.
So maybe there are also unintended effects, as you saw in New York with these super slim high rises, which are still unaffordable, so just for the happy few. So maybe there's also an idea to first do a pilot and then see what the results are.
Yeah, yeah. Is this some kind of call to action?
Yes, maybe. You know, if practitioners in a municipality, for instance, would be interested to do something like this, or developers say, actually, this is also something that's in our interest. Yeah, we'll be happy to talk to them and maybe see if we can also do some research or apply for some funding even at the central government level to see if these kind of things could actually work.
Yeah. So maybe we have some air rights instruments in a few years also in Rotterdam.
Who knows? Would be interesting.
Yeah. And you will be joining the discussion then again?
Of course I will. Yeah, I would be interested in everything that involves Rotterdam anyway. But this, of course, is my main interest also. Yeah. So yeah.
We'll see. Thanks a lot.
You're welcome.
Well, again, also the rooftop catalog for you.
Fantastic. Hard copy, which is often very nice to have.
Exactly. And now I can hand it to you personally in this time. So that's very, very nice.
Thank you very much.
And our next guest is on the table. So thank you. And maybe till another time.
Definitely.
Thanks. There was a short introduction between the two of you.
Good. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you too, Winy Maas. Yeah, it's really a special place. And we will have an interesting dialogue with Ehan Chen all the way from New York. I will introduce the two of you in a bit. First, I will say to the audience what will be on the other parallel session on the rooftop. There will be two presentations again. The first of Helen Toxopeus. She will elaborate on the project Naturevation, how to make working business models for ecological urban innovation. And the second presentation, the last presentation of today actually, is of Jacques Ferrier of Ferrier Machetti Studio, Porte des Ternes. if I say it, pronounce it correctly in French, but it's an impressive design for a new multi-layered landscape structure with green rooftops connected by bridges. But here I will speak also to two amazing guests. Here in the studio, welcome, Winy Maas from NVRDV. It's very nice to have you. Straight from the office, right?
No, from a traffic jam.
A traffic jam.
So there was and that's the next stage in post-corona development. So the amount of traffic jams announce liberty.
Liberty to travel freely.
Out.
Yeah, that's true. That's
our new hedonism.
Yeah, true. And we have Eran Chen on Zoom.
Hey guys. Thanks for having me. Hello, Winy. How are you?
Very good. Good to see you, man.
Same here. What a pleasure. Thank you for having me. I can tell you, New York City is waking up this morning, literally from virus, but also it's another beautiful day. I wasn't stuck in a traffic jam because I took the subway, but we can talk about that later.
No, we should. I want to go soon to New York because our boxes, our colorful boxes in the 181 is getting there. So the stones are there. It's getting colorful. So that's nice.
Fantastic. I actually drove by the other day and I saw the progress. So congratulations. Next time you come here, you should stop by. We should do a tour together.
Yeah, let's do that. Let's have a rooftop talk there and see. And talk about
a rooftop party.
Unboxing, yeah, definitely, because that's what you wrote a book about, Eran Chen. You're from ODA, the architectural firm in New York. Well, you already were discussing your designs and all the ideas you have, both very visionary architects, I may say, aiming for architectural innovation, new typologies, spatial renewings. Well, we will discuss this topic of the layered city with you, or you will go into a dialogue. And first, maybe we can start with somewhat older building, as I may say, the pavilion of the World Expo in Hanover in 2000. Because in a preliminary meeting, Eran, you told us about it, or you mentioned it. Yeah, that you were really intrigued by this design. It was really, yeah, well, it was an example of the layered city, right?
Well, I think the World Pavilion by Winy and you know, and its firm was such an inspiration for me as a young architect. 2000 is when I came to New York as a young architect, starting to form a vision about the future of cities. And that project and many others, by the way, has been huge inspiration, not only for me, but for a generation of architects. But one of the things I know, you know, we talked about the layered city and how you've managed in this pavilion to provoke such a simple but provocative idea that we could actually look at vertical structure in a different way, where it's not just a repetition of floors to create a volume, but actually a series of voids that could be very diverse and interact with one another. And I would say that for me, what stuck with me till today, because this project was so ahead of its time, is the idea that cities are a component, or should be a component, of well-sculpted and well-architected and well-cured voids rather than solids. And those voids in different scales are the ones that help us expand our life and our experiences and be able to sort of interact, right, with one another and with nature in such a surprising way. And I would say to you, Winy, that as somebody who's been an architect in New York City was everything but those ideas. New York City was all about the repetition of floors to create density. And when we look at the glorified Empire State Building or Chrysler Building or whatever, they were glorified by this shape that created repetition, where everything you've done in your career is exactly the opposite, isn't it?
Well, you mentioned New York and how it's proceeding, is there a glimpse of hope with, say, some attention to the public space now, with the big U, with the new island, with the High Line? I don't see it yet going up. A small spiral, but it's only an escape stair, I guess. But is there a glimpse of hope that things change now in New York to open itself a little bit up?
Yeah, absolutely. I think one thing that unifies New York and the success of that city is the density became such a monolith that we start as architects looking at the city as carve out spaces out of the monolith and not just as contribution with a building scale. And in our book, Unboxing New York, which is, again, I'm sure resonates with so many ideas that you've been developed with the years, we talk about, the spaces in between. We talk about the urban idea of carving out spaces. And I think we see it both in new type of construction, but also in urban decisions, like, pedestrianizing Times Square, like creating more courtyards that extend the streets, like bringing the public realm into different levels beyond the narrow street itself. So yes, there's a lot of hope.
I think in your suggestion for vertical porosity, which I think I completely agree with that. How does it relate maybe to the potential for updated air rights in New York? Because the air rights as they are a little bit only about carving the streets, but they're not carving other logics.
Yeah, I mean, the zoning has been very dated in New York City, and we've been struggling with it, trying to find sort of the gray area within the zoning that allows us for more porosity, or what we call the breathing room of buildings in neighborhoods. Because the logic was such that the envelope that the zoning allows you to build in is almost exactly the floor area that you can pack in. So with that kind of packaging, it's very hard to find any porosity whatsoever. I do think that there's hope because there's more conscious in city planning in other places to allow more of what I call performance-based zoning, where buildings envelope are not only defined by floor area, but defined by qualities that are created, like quality of public spaces and natural light and what they call quality housing zoning. And so we've designed a few buildings lately. I don't know if you've seen our building on 14th Street, for example, where instead of packing the envelope, we sort of giving up air rights of expansion to maintain the same floor area, but expand the envelope. And we have double height ceiling apartment. Every apartment has an inner recessed garden, etc. But it's a process.
Yeah, it's quite a process. I can see that, say, the exchange of FAR rights to neighbors help a little bit this discussion, this unpacking, as you call it. And I agree with that. It's now only filling up the envelopes. And I hope indeed that we could do a kind of next push in that discussion. Maybe we should, I don't know, visualize it even stronger. How this kind of this making voids, as you say, higher up, and to unpack, not only unbox, but also unpack the packing is maybe a good one to consider. In Paris now, this summer, the new enveloping of Paris will take shape in a series of studies that might be nice to exchange over the summer. But that's another story, of course. Very Haussmannian, and where can we allow for high rises and with what kind of logic? But it's maybe good to. It's anyway a good gesture of the local and national government to open the envelope and to discuss the economical and ecological values of that, and that would fit in your observation.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say, though, there's a few very interesting observations that I've collected through the years because the city is so strict. Number one, there's certain areas in New York that height is not limited. meaning they allow you to go very high. And until today, it was mostly used with what we call the slender tower technique, when developers buy air rights from neighboring building and just build those slender buildings. But we started looking at this idea, if the height is not limited, can we start opening gaps within buildings using that the property of height to create those inner gardens that are kind of inspired by your Expo in 2000, where you say quality of outdoor space doesn't have to be outside of the building. I mean, it's the roofs are great, the gardens are great, the streets, but quality of outdoor space could be within the building, within the envelope. And so we've designed now a tower, a slender tower that literally has these mega gaps within it, and they become communal gardens. The other observation then is that there are many underutilized urban spaces within the existing infrastructure in New York City, and definitely in Rotterdam and Netherlands and other places and other cities. And we need to be creative as architects to what degree we can carve out within those underutilized spaces. One example in New York is the inside courtyards of the city block. New York City has the city block, and the inner courtyards, which is the gap between buildings inside, it's about 60 feet. Usually it's privatized and it's very underutilized. And we were thinking of a way by which zoning would incentivize developers to go up and give up the backside of that courtyard and opening up to the streets, and therefore a series of pedestrian pockets could be revealed. So ideas like that are worth investigation.
That sounds really beautiful. I have to admit also that I'm involved in 53rd Street on a tower, also to try somehow the similar trick to make gaps to enlarge the view on Central Park. And it's good to exchange that. So I do hope, probably I will send you that. And maybe we can make a bridge between the two parks. So that would be my next step, to create the next step in layering.
I agree with that. Yeah, I mean, can you imagine the idea of democratizing roofs in general, or gaps in general within the building, and saying, well, if we can kind of conceptualize vertical gaps that are used by either communities of buildings or the public, can then one gap reach out to the next door gap, and the city would start create this kind of, as you said, bridges, this network of communal gaps where buildings are exchanging with other buildings in a democratic way and connecting those gaps throughout. This is another kind of strong idea that needs to be developed through zoning.
Well, that's a good one. How to convince owners or corporation of owners to allow for public components in it, and also to how to administer that and how to give that a status in itself. It's the aim for our next book. You know that we made this small book. It's called The Rooftop. Of course. It's a funny one. Yeah. And it's very nice that it's now there, just as a catalog of that.
It will be sent to
you get it. But it's no, it's actually the first book, because the next book is about what we call in the Dutch, they call it the Vereniging van Eigenaren. It's an association of proprietors that own buildings, and the one that is who has the penthouse is actually the king of the society. So, then the others are not so happy with that. So, in order to activate basically a juridical status of that roof, will be good to help that process a little bit. Yeah. So that will be the next step. Will be about that, how to create literally a juridical status for collective and ultimately public components in a vertical section, and that is. So I'm looking forward to that next book in the next year. I guess Léon will push that on the market.
Yeah, it's fantastic. These are similar ideas. Since you showed your book, we just came out with this book Unboxing New York about a year ago, But in one of the chapters, because this is sort of very similar to your train of thought, Winy, which is sort of a catalog of ideas. I think we architects need to do more of this, right? We have a tendency to kind of secure our ideas as if they're our own, but sharing those as a catalog of ideas I think is very useful. And we had a series of diagrams that has to do with what we call POPs, privately owned public spaces. And these privately owned public spaces is, in a sense, contribution of the owners of a plot to the public realm. But it's not just philanthropic. It's not just for the sake of giving back. It is actually creating value to the buildings itself. And if we can start wrap our hands around how using private owned spaces and giving them back and opening them up to the public, whether if it's a roof or a courtyard or maybe a second floor garden, actually creates more value to the lot owners themselves. If we can wrap our head around that formula, then the initiation would be private and not just governmental, monitored.
I think it's a very good idea. These POPs or pop-ups, they go up, but I got it. But it's an typical Dutch sick joke. Don't forget it. There's what we try to do in urbanism in the Netherlands is, and we call it spreadsheet urbanism. That sounds bad, because spreadsheet architecture means in the end exactly what you say: how to make the stupid building and maximize its revenues. In the case of urbanism, and you add a good point to that. Because in the Netherlands, our urbanism has to pay off currently like values like social housing, values like cheap working places, values like a greenification or a small park, but also values like architecture come out of that. So due to the value changes in the Netherlands, growing construction prices and enormously growing, say, selling and renting prices, this spreadsheet and the margin of the profit, that's under discussion. And and this kind of idea is also your POPs idea. Maybe I could bring it in for especially when you negotiate then with owners. In their development potential, this kind of so they can get. We use your laws basically.
We just had a discussion with Erwin and Stefan Al from New York about these POPs and how to use them in Rotterdam exactly, and that it really could be beneficial to add also to the surroundings and also to the building itself. So yeah, that would be very interesting. And Erwin is open for is in for an experiment and pilot in the Netherlands. So we should definitely do that, and maybe Iran will join in that as well.
We still have to make a tower which is composed out of different architects and different landscape architects.
That would be really a nice thing within a layered city. Also, really would like to. If that's okay with you.
Sorry, the setting is a bit like.
It's just the best. You are the experts, and it's perfect that you have this wonderful conversation. But I really would like also to go more into this design of the layered city, because you spoke about this tower that could have some gaps within, but shouldn't we be like should we? It's a necessity to have these gaps and maybe these bridges between gaps, or what will it look like? What are the components, these design components to work on this?
We are maybe talking too much about the juridical or
the
political
instruments and
instrumentalization to do that, which are very important. If we can make a zoning act which includes this POPs, or vertical POPs, or other kind of extras in this, and makes it affordable through densification. That I think is a starting point. The design of that is, you're very right. We need to give these kind of things or quality aspects in terms of sizing, in terms of light or sun, in terms of cooling aspirations. and maybe also in programmatic aspirations.
And
But
inclusiveness of the buildings as well.
inclusivity is fair enough. At the moment in the Netherlands, the inclusivity is done through incorporation of different prices of housing in your towers, and prices of office or working spaces. Those are of course, inclusivity is more than only this kind of percentage of it, and that can also reach out to cultural phenomena. I still want to make a mosque halfway in a tower. So that's. Oh, by the way, I'm making the first. I was dreaming about that in 2000, about the first cemetery on top of a building, and we will construct it next year in Monaco, in south of France. So if you need a place, far future, but then we can maybe talk about it.
That's an interesting idea. The most valuable real estate now is at the top of building. Let's give it to the dead, and so we can all forget about it. I just want to maybe add a little bit of sort of practical examples, because you're right. You know, we might be talking too sort of philosophical, but think about the most important real estate in cities. It's the ground floor. That's the most important real estate for the public realm in the city. It was traditionally taken and was valued for retail. If you create density, which is what, let's say in Rotterdam, because you know we're doing the post building in Rotterdam, and I've learned the city so closely. It has an opposite problem than New York. It lacks the amount of density that activates the streets, and you walk in streets and they're kind of empty, as opposed to New York, where you walk in New York Times Square or in Soho, and you can't even stop for a second. Creating density helps create activity at the ground floor, but retail, the traditional type of retail, is dying, and that's actually a very interesting opportunity to all of us, because if you look at most buildings, the footprint at the bottom is the biggest one, and it's captured traditionally by retail that is unsuccessful. What if we start transferring that real estate into pockets of public spaces, give up areas of retail, or create a retail that is much thinner and much more interactive, or use the retail as an access way from different directions, but shrink that floor plan to expand the sidewalk while increasing density. The balancing of these two things, increasing density to create activation 24/7, and opening up a new type of realm at the street level, might be a first good start, both for New York and a city like Rotterdam, even though they're coming from different directions. One is overpopulated or densified, and the other one maybe under densified.
I agree with you. This tendency of the value of the ground floor, and that shrinks because of because of Corona and the end of retail, or that's or the halfway end. That's happening a lot. In Eindhoven, we try to solve that and to bring that actually the shops to factory, to producing spaces again.
Right.
So, because of the design industry, obviously, and that is so that you would have next to Prada, you find a machine room of making furniture or whatever. So there's that kind of mix. That's one of the ways also to deal with that kind of porosity that come across. But I agree with you. I wouldn't mind to live on ground floor, maybe on Park Avenue, and that way if if nothing is happening, then why?
Right.
Because that's anyway also very important. Also to keep housing somehow involved on the ground floor, because that gives a 24/7 safety issue.
Yeah. And really,
you've done an amazing project, the market in Rotterdam, where it's just a very provocative project that says retail doesn't have to be, or engagement in retail, food and beverage doesn't have to be a linear space on a street. Let's create a cathedral for a market, and that cathedral is an extension of the public realm, and it becomes a market, and it's surrounded and wrapped around by housing and offices. That's I think that's a brilliant project in that sense. and again, provocative to the future of what we can do at the ground floor or at the public ground before we even talk about how we can fragment the buildings on the upper level and connect them with bridges or open them to the public. So I think that's an amazing example of it.
Can we make, if you make one tower and you do it like this, and I make another one and do like this, then we have two. Then we make a market hall and a valley and, and a big kiss to the city. That's
there you go.
So that's for your next.
Vini, I'm sure that we're going to find a developer that would go with us on that idea. But in San Francisco, we're designing a mega residential building that is not a cylinder tower. It actually has a big footprint. And what they thought of doing originally is build two towers. But the two towers are linked. It's more than a bridge. They're linked in many ways. And then horizontally between the two cores, you create connections, almost like a loop that allows for different way of movement and interaction on a vertical tower. And in that connection, we bring all of the nature sort of community accessories or amenities, like a dog run, like a coffee shop, a bar, small retail, kindergartens, playgrounds, and we put them in those horizontal connections. And now living in the building is part of kind of exploring the neighborhood in not a dead end way.
That's a beauty. That's should be built.
So I think you should tell me where your tower on 57th Street, and I'm going to find something to get close to.
I will send it. And it's let me see also show, because I think the two projects should be different. So if you make something and then I make something else, otherwise
yeah, that would be boring.
No, but then we enlarge the catalog of potential porous towers. I think in the end, that's what is that if every architect makes another kind of interpretation of that kind of concept, then you have then the city becomes more brilliant, and then you have also you get intrigued to go up because that one is different than that one, and then that bridge will come. That's so that would be, I think, a wonderful say exploration. When are you coming to Rotterdam?
When Rotterdam would allow me to come. I think that right now we're not allowed yet, but I actually planned a family vacation, not only in the Netherlands but in the entire area last summer, and then I pushed it to this summer, and now we're going to push it to next summer. But hopefully soon. The construction has started at the post, or at least I've been told, and so I'm hoping in the next few months to come and check it out. I'll definitely give you a call.
Yeah, no, that will be wonderful. That's very good.
You already talked about some amazing projects. I've one more question. We are really talking about this layered city, bridges between parks, between buildings. But what will I should say for you definitely shaping the city. What should the city look like 20, 30, 50 years from now? In what kind of city will we walk or be in a traffic jam or not in the traffic jam? What will it look like?
Do you want to say it first?
Okay.
What's your dream?
Quite a monumental question, but I would say a few principles. First of all, we should neglect the idea of one center for one city. If you look at Manhattan as an example, it has 5 boroughs and it has the island. And traditionally, the island was the center of the world, the center of business, culture, leisure, and everything else around it was commuter towns where people mostly lived, maybe studied, and came to New York back and forth. That idea reliance on transportation, even if it's public transportation, should be radically changed to a point where cities are made of many, many strong centers. Each one is to some degree self-sustainable, that it includes mixed use that allow people to work, live, play, enjoy, have culture within a walking distance. And then the network of centers is what will be connected through sort of the public transportation. So we change our routine of transporting to work every day, etc. I think that would be radically changed through localization of programs. Second, I think we're going to start looking architecturally at cities as a monolith that has voids in it, as opposed to a series of individual buildings. And if we wrap our hand around it, think about it as sort of a Swiss cheese, that we can start saying we've got this kind of built environment that is mixed and diverse. How do we carve out public spaces in different scale, or what I call the fractal city, from a very small personal garden to a communal gathering spaces, to a plaza, to a street, to whatever. And we carve them out in a network of public spaces three-dimensionally, at the ground level, at the upper levels. And so we're going to start seeing a network of public interactions in the three-dimensional sphere, and not just rely on the street, and the sidewalk as a place of to expand our lives. These are just one or two ideas, but I'm curious to hear Winy's vision as well.
Nice. I have one more question, if that's okay. Does it require also some new kind of craftsmanship of an architect?
Craftsmanship.
Yeah. So new design principles, a new way of thinking. I don't know.
Well, you need anyway character as an architect to make that doable, and not to bend too easy. For
you are definitely not
for say the no-sayers.
Yeah.
So that is what I anyway would advise any listener to look at it, because if you had this dream of this network or this web city, what you are making, this 3D web city, which I agree to, that's the super sponge on the planet, is I think it's a beautiful concept to do. But then, you have to work on a small detail to make the first bridge, the first cavity in that place, and then and don't stop is basically then the formula.
Yeah.
And there are, I'm sorry, just to add to that, and Winy knows more than anybody, the complexity of doing good buildings that are different is not just in the creation of the ideas. It's really in the implementation of those ideas. And we are today more than ever are facing the complexities of reality, from the political realities, from the urge to create more equitable city, more affordable city, more affordable public spaces, to the press of the construction cost that Winy talked about that is increasing, from ownerships who just wants to look at the bottom line, how much money they would make, and government disability to think outside the box, generally speaking. All of these are very constraining issues for architects like us. And I think the strength of the ability to execute even simple ideas. You start with a simple idea and then execute it, and then prove that it can be done. And all of a sudden, yes, it's successful, that we can build on those small ideas and learn from one another. One of the things, by the way, thank you for doing this, because that international sort of information that crossed bridges, even as ideas between Europe and New York and other places in the world, allow us collectively to help each other make that change.
Perfect. Well, thank you for contributing to this and joining us. Winy, your dream, something to...
I think, and there are, these days, we have many demands of our city.
Yeah,
from
really complex.
The openness that Erwin was talking about, to the greenness that I sometimes showed lately also in the media, to the inclusivity part. But I would like to add one thing, because these are values that are almost like global. But what intrigues me is how that kind of global values are translated and will be translated into diversity. Because I think that it would be wonderful if the city, due to its climate, due to its cultural climate, due to its stubbornness, due to its openness, depending on the definition, that it formulates this kind of global tasks into its own way somehow. And then that makes it intriguing. Then you get also a collection of interpretation. Then you want to go somewhere, and then you and maybe there are then also unexpected say beauties that can be celebrated, or unexpected say specialisms that can occur in that kind of cities. And so that's what I felt when you asked the question. So what can I add to beside that kind of values that lead to the painting, for instance, that Aaron is painting, but also that I sometimes paint together. But then how to accommodate and how to land that also in Dubai, or how to land that in Shenzhen, or how to do that in Africa. That is that's what I wouldn't mind to explore.
Yeah. Well, wonderful. Thank you very much to the both of you for this wonderful conversation. And I think well, a lot to be discussed and to be talked about maybe later on. But yeah, thank you again very much. Winy, you already have the rooftop catalog, I think, or otherwise.
This is
well, I can give your own booklet to you.
Thank you very much. Very happy.
And as said, Iran, a booklet will send to you as well.
Fantastic. Thank you. I'm looking forward to this. Thank you so much for having me, and really looking forward to meeting you soon in person. Bye-bye, guys.
Bye-bye. Thanks.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
We'll exchange soon.
Thank you. Thanks.
So we have had our 4 dialogues. Thank you, Winy, for this final conversation. Léon is joining us now at the table, and we are 5 minutes well to the ending. And I would really like to conclude with you, Léon. You have watched the show, maybe some presentations. What is your observation of today?
Well, I found I was just 10 minutes ago, I was watching 2 screens at one time, and while Winy and Iran were talking about bridges between building and open up, at the same moment, Jacques Frier in Paris was showing images from a nice building with bridges in between them of what he's planning in Paris, and then we saw Bos on the rooftop there, and it was really a great diversity to not in the way that Winy meant it, but there were people on rooftops giving presentations. We were here in these strange surroundings, and there was this kind of energy of people wanting to develop something with each other. And what I really like, and you saw it also in the conversation between Iran and Winy, that at first, like 7 years ago, we only had said, "Oh, rooftops, yeah, great, rooftops, yeah, green." It was only like. And now we're going into detail. We're going into a much deeper level of possibilities and how complicated it is. So and that means also we come into a phase that we are actually doing in it.
Yeah.
We're not only dreaming about something beautiful. No, we're implementing something really difficult in a way. And that doesn't always make the talks nicer or smoother, because it's a complicated thing.
Yeah.
But I really love it. And well, you saw the enthusiasm with Iran also, and with other international people that came by today. And that was very good. But I would also like to end with Winy in a way, because we started with his manifesto, of course. And that's a start. And one of Winy's favorite 2 words are next step.
Mm-hmm.
So I would like to discuss with him for 2 minutes the next step in what are we going to do now. We have this rooftop catalog. We have all those people who, in a way, stand behind a manifesto of such kind.
And
what should we do?
will extend the manifesto as well. So you made this great opening statement, and I think all the insights of today will add to it, and then we'll have a even extended version of this. But the question, indeed, next step.
No, there are a couple of things because the Dakendagen do become a little institution at this moment. So from childhood, it's going to my maturity and matureness, and that is that's one. I think the starting of in that way to get the research basically more developed. The next step is also after ideas to get to construction, to the jurisdiction, to go to the air rights system. So I can imagine that this kind of format that you started by coincidence maybe, but this year, that could be, I think, a nice series to go on. The second element is what we dreamed this year also to have the first bridges. That didn't happen
between the rooftops, right?
Yeah. So that is that's still on the list of.
Sure, it is.
Not to stop with that and to find another excuse to do that, so that we don't have to go to Rome, but that we can do it in Rotterdam, since the Eurovision Festival is not here anymore. So that is definitely an important part. It's also, I think it's good that the Dakendagen also somehow involve themselves in the inspiration for the building projects in Rotterdam, if not at other places, so that they get the kind of stamp approved by. It becomes a label, and yes, it will be very good to find a way to apply for the fundings that are needed to make this agenda of the air rights of the city. Rooftops is not only roofs, but everything above us, and this sky under tomorrow's sky, that we somehow can that will become a research fund also to have that done. It should be possible, and maybe even with both private as also academic funds to get also that step. That would be my dream, to make say the Dakendagen not only like the best party place of the year, because you should keep that. I advise. Especially the coming year, very important, but also to make that to make it even more serious, and combine that jolliness with that serious.
Yeah,
it's quite a task.
It's quite a task indeed, and maybe in collaboration also with AIR, of course.
Yeah, and all the other parties in the city.
Exactly.
We're working together with.
But I'm looking forward also to the next floating forest. That would be my next project, to connect not only a bridge, but to make simply a plate of 1 hectare of forest destination. If it's so complicated to make parks in Rotterdam, then we can add them on somewhere on the middle, and to make it even bigger.
Wow!
All the different layers. Well, let's do that, and let's meet next year this time on a big rooftop walk in the city
with the bridges. Definitely.
Above ground this time.
Perfect. Well, thank you very much. Another thank you to all the guests, including you, Léon, Winy, Barbara, all the guests who have been on this table.
And look who we have there.
Hey, we have a live connection with Bas and René on the rooftop. How are you doing up there?
Well, we have to be very honest. There was some improvisation going on and some technical difficulties. But apart from that, the presentations and the guests were amazing.
Great, great. So yeah, did gain some really inspirational projects you have seen. You gained some new insights on working on this layered city. Perfect.
Yeah, I think I was already saying it was very diverse, and the fact that people were actually standing on the rooftop here, I think that really added the layer we needed today to the layered city.
Wow. And there was no rain?
Not yet.
Not yet.
Not yet, but it's coming from Antwerp to here. So the technicians have just told us we don't have too long anymore.
But we do have one special thing to do, because Bas, do you already have a rooftop catalog?
I do not have one yet.
Oh, here you go.
Renee, do you have one yet?
No. What?
There you go.
Oh, thank you. Hey, and on the technical side, do you have a catalog yet? There you go.
Hey.
And now we're done. Oh dear, look at that. Yeah.
And may I add to that, guys, because the three of you, Sophie, Bas, and René, you made this all possible, and I want to have a great applause from everybody here in this room for you making this day possible.
Well, if I may say so, it really was an honor. It was a complex task. Working on the layered city is complex, and maybe organizing such an event is also quite complex. But it was great, and thank you for the opportunity and all the partners who helped us and made this possible. So, well, I
see you next year.
See you next year, definitely. Thank you for watching, and hope to see you soon. physically on the rooftops or ground level or in the layered city.
In the layered city.
Bye, thank you.
Hi.
Don't jump.
Nee, sorry. Oh, helikopter.